They made me certify the report that destroyed my career. This time, I read page 9 first. The copier was still warm when Alan Reeve put his hand flat on my stack of invoices. "Don't overthink it, Wren," he said. "Initial the cover sheet, and I'll walk it up myself." I looked at his hand. Gold wedding band. Ink on the knuckle. The same small scar near the thumb. Behind him, the whiteboard in the finance suite still said, "Close out, Thursday 10/9, 5 p.m. in green marker." Somebody had drawn a smiley face under it. That smiley face had been there for 11 days. I knew that because I had already lived this Monday once. The top invoice was from Cascade Modular Housing LLC, $480,000, plus freight. The remit to line gave a street address in Rancho Cordova with a suite number. Suite 214. I had learned, in a deposition room 3 years from now, that Suite 214 was a mailbox in the back of a shipping store, 19 inches wide. A man had held up a photograph of it and asked me to read the number out loud. "Wren." Alan tapped the stack twice. "The state closes the portal Thursday. We do not get a second window." "I know," I said. My voice came out steady, which surprised me. My hands were not steady. I put them behind the copier lid, so he could not see them. The last thing I remembered before this morning was rain on a windshield on Highway 50. I had been driving to my own deposition. A gravel truck came through the light at Bradshaw. I remember thinking, absurdly, that I had left my good pen at home. Then there was no sound at all. And then there was a copier, warm under my palm, and a Monday I had already spent. It was 7:50, 2 a.m. on Monday, October 6. Alan Reeve was smiling at me the way you smile at a door you already have the key to. "I'll bring it to your office," I said. He took his hand off the stack. That was the first thing I changed. I had worked at Sierra Bridge Relief Foundation for 6 years. Grants compliance manager, 34 years old, a mortgage I was proud of, and a title nobody outside the sector understood. What that title meant was simple. When a $9.4 million wildfire recovery subaward closed out, somebody had to sign the certification page. The certification said the money went where the grant agreement promised. That somebody was me. In my first life, I signed it at 4:41 p.m. on Thursday. Alan brought me a coffee and stood in my doorway while I did it. "You're the only one here who reads anything," he said. I laughed. I remember laughing. 14 months later, the state's single audit came back. A single audit is the yearly examination every organization gets when it spends government money. Ours had been clean for 9 years running. $2.3 million had gone to Cascade Modular Housing. The money was for 30 interim housing units, small factory-built homes set on pads for families burned out of the Gray Ridge fire. 9 units were ever delivered. 21 families spent that winter in motel vouchers and a church gym in Placerville. I visited the gym in January of that year. There were cots with names on masking tape. A woman asked me when the houses were coming, and I told her soon, because I believed it. My signature was on page 9, not Alan's, mine. The word they used was certifying official. It means the person who swears to the government that the numbers are true. It also means the person the government looks at first when the numbers are not. I lost my job in March. I lost my CPA candidacy. The civil case under the False Claims Act named me in the caption, second, right after the foundation. That law lets the government sue people who submit false billing to it. Alan resigned that October with a letter about health and family. There was a consulting agreement nobody made public. I heard about it from a woman at a conference who assumed I already knew. I sold the house in 18 months. My mother told her book club I was between things. I did not come back with proof. I want to be honest about that, because it took me most of that first hour to understand it. I came back with a map. I knew where the bodies were. I could not walk into the state office on Monday morning and say, "In 14 months, an auditor will find this." Nobody signs a report because a woman had a dream. A memory told me where to look. That was all it could ever do. Everything I knew was worthless unless I could make it exist on paper this week in a way a stranger could verify. And I had until Thursday at 5. Here is what actually existed on Monday, October 6. A closeout package, 3/4 assembled. A vendor file that was thin in a way I had never questioned. A budget modification memo that moved $400,000 from case management into temporary housing procurement, and an executive director who needed one signature that was not his own. I sat down at 8:15 and did the most boring thing available to me. I opened the shared drive. I had authorized access to the grants folder. That was my job. I did not go anywhere I was not supposed to be. I did not touch anyone's mailbox. I did not put a single file on a personal drive. I want that on the record, even if the only record is my own memory of it. In my first life, the thing that ruined the people around me was almost never the fraud. It was the shortcut somebody took, trying to prove it. I opened the budget modification memo and clicked the file history. Every document in our system keeps a version history. It is a list of who saved the file and when. The memo was dated August 4. The state's approval letter was dated August 11. The version history said the file had been saved 7 times. The last save was August 22 by A. Reeve at 9:06 p.m. 11 days after the state approved it. Somebody had opened the approved memo and saved it again. I put version 4 beside version 7 and read them line by line. It took 40 minutes. There was exactly one difference. In version 4, the housing line said fabricated units, delivered and installed. In version 7, it said fabricated units, procured. 2 words gone, delivered and installed. A procurement is a purchase. A delivery is a thing that arrives. If you are paying for 30 houses that never came, those 2 words are the entire lawsuit. That was not proof of anything. I made myself sit with that. People edit documents for 100 honest reasons. A version history is a clue, not a conviction, but it told me where to look next. At 9:40, I opened the California Secretary of State's business search. It is public. Anyone with a browser can use it. I used it from my own desk with my coffee going cold beside the keyboard. Cascade Modular Housing, LLC. Registered July 29 of that year. The first Cascade invoice in our file was dated August 6. 8 days between a company existing and a company billing us $500,000. The statement of information listed a manager. C. Alder. The address was Suite 214, Rancho Cordova. I sat there for a while with my hand over my mouth. Corinne Alder had been Alan's operations coordinator at his last foundation in Reno. I knew that because she came to our holiday party the previous December. Alan had introduced her as an old colleague. She told me she was doing something in logistics now and asked where I got my earrings. A registry filing is not evidence of fraud. I said that out loud in the empty conference room, to nobody. It is a form somebody fills out. It proves a name on a page and a date. It does not prove where a single dollar went. But now I had 2 dates, 2 words, and 1 name. That was a lead. On Monday morning, a lead was more than I had any right to. Alan called me into his office at 2. He had moved the guest chair closer to his desk. He did that when he wanted a conversation to feel warm. "Close the door," he said. "Good news first. He slid a single page across the desk. It was a draft memo to the board's executive committee. The subject line said Deputy Director, Programs and Compliance. My name was in the second paragraph. Effective Friday, Alan said. It's a 14% bump. It's also signature authority on all state and federal instruments, which, frankly, you already exercise without the title. In my first life, he gave me this memo in November, as a thank you. Not in October. Not 4 days before a deadline. He had moved it up because something had spooked him. I did not know what yet. Possibly nothing. Possibly a version history has a viewer log too. And possibly he had checked it at lunch. That's I let myself sound winded, because I was. Alan, that's a lot for a Monday. You've earned it twice over. He leaned back and laced his fingers. Now, the boring half. The final expenditure report has to be certified and uploaded by 5 on Thursday. 9.4 million. Fully drawn. I want it in the portal Wednesday, so we're not doing this at 4:59. Where's the vendor file? The pause was maybe half a second long. He was very good. Which vendor? All of them. I certify the whole package, so I pull every vendor file. I kept my voice at the exact pitch of a woman doing paperwork. Cascade is the big one. I've got purchase orders and invoices. I don't have delivery confirmations or installation sign-offs for the modular units. I'd normally have 30 of them. That's a procurement line, Wren. He made a small, dismissive motion with 2 fingers. It was reclassified in August with the state's blessing. We paid for units, not for a delivery schedule. There's an approval letter in the file. There is. I agreed. I read it. Then we're fine. Except the site logs. I said it lightly, like a bookkeeping annoyance. Placerville shows 9 pads set. If we bought 30 units, 21 of them are sitting somewhere. I have to write down where. They're staged at the fabricator. Then that's all I need. A staging confirmation on their letterhead. Alan looked at me for 3 full seconds. I have thought about those 3 seconds more than any other part of that week. He was deciding whether I was a problem or a process. He decided process because processes can be managed, and because he had just handed me a promotion. Corinne handles their documentation, he said. I'll ask her. I did not react to the name. That took everything I had. Perfect, I said. Wren. He tapped the promotion memo. I need you loose on this. Not slow. Loose. I can work with procured, I said, if that's what the state approved. Alan's shoulders came down 2 inches. That is the moment I want you to remember. Everything after it grew out of it. He believed he had won at 2:11 p.m. on Monday. Good, he said. One thing. I straightened the memo on his desk, unhurried. If I certify a $2.3 million line without delivery documentation, my file needs to show why. Not for you. For whoever reads this in 3 years. Nobody reads this in 3 years. Somebody always does. I smiled, and it was the truest thing I said all day. Just send me an email. Say the Cascade invoices are approved by you as executive director, and that no further vendor documentation is required for closeout. 1 paragraph. Then, I certify from your instruction, and the file is clean. He thought about it for 4 seconds. I counted them. He was thinking that an email costs nothing. He was thinking that instructing a subordinate is what a director does. He was thinking, I am almost sure that a paragraph from him made me easier to steer than a paragraph from me. Sure, Alan said. I'll get it to you tonight. I went back to my office and did the second boring thing. I opened the compliance documentation log. It is the internal ticket system our auditors review every year. Every entry is time-stamped, and nobody can quietly delete one. I filed a request. Request for vendor delivery documentation. Cascade Modular Housing LLC. Subaward SB 2415. Items 30 modular units. I attached the invoice list. I set the priority to standard because urgent invites a phone call and standard invites a paper trail. I copied Priya Raman, our finance director. The procedure says finance is copied on procurement documentation requests. I have followed that procedure for 6 years, and nobody has ever asked me why. Then I called the state's subrecipient help desk. I did not accuse anyone of anything. I asked a general question. For a housing procurement line, what documentation does closeout expect when units are purchased but not yet installed? Are you asking about a specific award? The woman said. I'm asking about the category. She put me on hold for 6 minutes. Somewhere behind her, a printer was running. Generally, we'd expect delivery or acceptance documentation, she said. Purchase alone doesn't establish that the beneficiary received anything. Do you want a ticket number for the call? Yes, I said. Please. I wrote it in my log at 4:26 p.m. Then I wrote the time I placed the call and the name she gave me, and one sentence about what she said. At 6:58 p.m., my phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. I was standing there with the fridge open and a jar of olives in my hand. Alan Reeve. To me, copied to no one. The Cascade invoices are approved by me as executive director. No further vendor documentation is required for the closeout certification. Please certify as presented and upload by Wednesday. I set the olives down very carefully, as if the sound might wake something. He thought he had just handed me a leash. He had just handed me a dated, written instruction. It sat inside a documentation request he did not know existed. 6 hours after a state agency told me on a logged call what that file should have contained. I read it 4 times. Then I went and got my good pen. I did not answer the email that night. That was deliberate. An answer at 7 p.m. is a woman who is upset. An answer at 9 the next morning is a woman doing her job. I wanted the second one, and I wanted the timestamp to prove it. I slept badly. Around 2 in the morning, I gave up and sat on the kitchen floor with my back against the dishwasher. In the life I remembered, I had spent that same night watching a cooking show. I had gone to bed pleased about a promotion I did not yet know was a hook with a worm on it. I thought about the church gym in Placerville, the masking tape names, a boy doing homework on a cot with his shoes still on. Then I made a list on the back of an envelope, and every item on the list was something a stranger could check without believing a word I said. I got to the office at 6:40 on Tuesday. The building was dark, except for the cleaning crew. I made coffee in the kitchenette and printed nothing. Everything I did that morning, I did inside systems that keep their own records. At 7:15, I forwarded Alan's email into the compliance ticket I had opened Monday. Our system attaches an email with the original headers intact. Sender, recipients, send time, message ID. Then I added one line of my own in the ticket, where the auditors read, received written instruction from ED to certify without vendor delivery documentation, escalating to finance for concurrence before certification. I did not write fraud. I did not write concerns. I wrote what happened. Then I walked to Priya Raman's office and waited outside it until she arrived at 7:50. Priya had been at Sierra Bridge for 9 years. She was the person who found a 4-cent variance in a reconciliation and would not go home. She kept a bag of almonds in her desk and a photograph of a boat she did not own. In my first life, she left the foundation in February, 2 months before the audit landed. I never learned why. I had always assumed she got a better offer. Standing in her doorway that Tuesday, I understood that she had probably seen something and been alone with it. "You're early," she said. "That's ominous. I need 30 minutes, and I need you to tell me I'm being paranoid." She put her bag down. "That's my favorite kind of meeting." I gave it to her flat, the 2 words missing from the memo. The version history with a save 11 days after state approval, the registry filing from July 29, and the first invoice from August 6, the help desk ticket number, Alan's email. I did not mention Reno. I did not mention Corinne Alder's face at the holiday party. I had a name from a public filing and a memory from a life nobody else had lived. I was not going to put the second one in front of a finance director. Priya read the email twice. Then she pulled her laptop over and opened the general ledger herself. "Cascade," she said. "Give me the vendor number." V4471, she typed. She stopped typing. "Huh. Say the huh out loud, Priya." Vendor was set up August 5. She turned the screen so I could see it. By Alan, not by accounts payable. Directors can create vendors in an emergency. We turned that on during the fire because we were buying bottled water at midnight, and nobody turned it back off. Nobody turned it back off. She scrolled. 4 payments, 600, 600, 600, 500, round numbers. All electronic transfer. All approved same day. Same day approval means nobody sat with it overnight. In a normal month, a $600,000 transfer waits for a second set of eyes and a phone call. "Priya, I'm not asking you to conclude anything." "Good, because I'm not going to." She rubbed her eyes with the back of her wrist. "Here's what I can say. There is no delivery documentation in the vendor file, and there should be. There is a same-day vendor setup by the person who approved the payments, and there should not be. That's bad. That's control gaps. Control gaps are not theft." She looked up. "They're the conditions where theft doesn't get caught." That's a different sentence, and I need you to hear the difference. I hear it. So, what do? We do the thing that's in the policy, and nowhere else. She was already typing. Section 11. Finance director may request an independent review of any transaction prior to certification. You'd be going around Alan. I'd be going around nobody. I'd be using a paragraph the board wrote in 2019. She kept typing. "Gehring Fells does our single audit. I'm asking Marcus Fells to run a limited procedures engagement on the Cascade line. That's an outside firm. That's the entire point. If I look at it, I'm a colleague with an opinion. If Marcus looks at it, it's a work paper." She hit send and sat back and finally looked at me properly. "Wren, I'm doing this because of the documents, not because of you. If Marcus finds 30 signed delivery tickets in a drawer somewhere, you and I are going to feel very stupid together. I'd love to feel stupid." "No, you wouldn't," she said. "But it's nice of you to say." Marcus Fells called at 11:20. He had a flat, unhurried voice, like a man reading a train timetable. He asked for read-only access to the vendor file, the general ledger detail, the budget modification with its version history, and the state approval letter. He asked one question about the closeout deadline. He did not react when I said Thursday at 5. "Miss Halliday, I want to be clear about what this is," he said. "Limited procedures means I look at a defined set of documents and report what I find. I am not going to hand you a conclusion about anyone's intent. I understand. I'm going to hand you a list of what's supported and what isn't. That's less satisfying than people expect. That's all I want. People usually want more than that." A pause. "One more thing. Do not go looking for anything else. If you find it, I can't use it, and it makes you look like a person building a case instead of a person doing a job. I've only used systems I'm authorized to use. Keep it that way. Give me until tomorrow afternoon. Alan found me at lunch. I was in the kitchenette with a sad container of leftover rice. He came in and took a mug down and did not turn around while he spoke. Priya's asking accounts payable about Cascade. I copied Priya on a documentation request Monday. That's the procedure. And you forwarded my email into a compliance ticket. So there was a viewer log after all. Or Priya's request had already reached him. It did not matter which. Alan, you told me to certify from your instruction, I said. Your instruction has to be in the file, or it isn't an instruction. It's a conversation. He turned around then. He was still holding the empty mug. Do you know what an open audit file does to a funder relationship? I know what an unsupported certification does to me. To you. He set the mug down. There it is. That's not fair, isn't it? 41 people work here. His voice stayed low, which was worse than shouting. The Placerville site closes in 11 days if the closeout misses Thursday. The state can disallow the entire drawn amount, $9.4 million. That is not a finding, Wren. That is the organization. It was a good speech. It was the same speech he gave the board, in my first life, in a different room, about a different week. It had worked then. Then let's make Thursday, I said. I'm not trying to blow the deadline. I'm trying to certify something I can defend. Those are the same project. They are not the same project. They are if the delivery tickets exist. I let it sit between us. Do they exist? He picked the mug back up. Corinne is pulling them today, he said. You'll have them by close of business. Send them to the ticket, not to me. It has to land in the file. Fine. And Alan. He was at the door. The promotion memo. Do you want to hold it until after closeout? It might look strange in the same week. I watched him weigh it. I watched him decide that a woman worried about how her promotion looked was a woman still inside the machine. No, he said. Warmer now. You've earned it. I'll sign it Friday. He left. I put my forehead against the cabinet for exactly 10 seconds. Then I washed the container and went back to work. At 4:04 p.m., something landed in the compliance ticket. Sender, Corinne Alder, Cascade Modular Housing, LLC. Subject, SB 2415 delivery confirmations. Attached, a PDF, 11 pages, titled Cascade, Delivery, Log, Final. I opened it with cold hands. 30 rows. Unit serial numbers in a clean column. Delivery dates spanning August 19 through September 30. A recipient signature line at the bottom of each page, signed Sierra Bridge Relief Foundation, Site Operations, in a looping hand I did not recognize. If I had received this in my first life, I would have filed it and slept fine. I would have told Alan it looked complete. I would have signed on Thursday and gone out for a drink. I read the dates again, August 19 through September 30. Then I opened our own site logs for Placerville, which I have access to because I audit them. The Placerville interim housing site had a graded pad and a utility trench through most of August. The first unit set on that pad on September 12. I knew the date without looking, because I had signed the site readiness form myself. But I looked anyway, and I saved a copy of the log page into the ticket, because knowing a thing is not the same as showing it. 11 units were logged as delivered before there was anywhere on Earth to put them. Then I did the last thing, the one I would not have thought of a year ago. I opened the document properties. Author, C. Elda. Created. 3:50, 1 p.m., Tuesday, October 7. Modified. 3:58 p.m., same day, 13 minutes before it was sent to me. 11 pages of delivery history for 30 houses across 6 weeks, and the document had been born that afternoon. While I was washing a rice container in the kitchenette, I sat very still. I did not email Alan. I did not email Corinne Alder. I did not pick up the phone, because a phone call leaves nothing behind but two people's memories, and mine were already worth less than they should be. I forwarded the PDF, unaltered, to Marcus Fells and to Priya, inside the ticket. I wrote 4 sentences under it. Received vendor-generated delivery log at 4:04 p.m. today. Document metadata shows creation at 3:51 p.m. today. 11 delivery dates precede the site readiness date of September 12 per the Sierra Bridge site log attached, requesting independent verification of signatures and unit serial numbers before any certification. Marcus replied in 9 minutes. It was the shortest email I have ever received from an auditor. Do not certify. Preserve everything. I am calling your board chair tonight. Then he called me instead of waiting for a reply. Miss Halliday, I'm going to say a phrase and I need you not to repeat it outside this call. Legal hold. I know what that is. Tell me what you think it is. Nobody deletes anything. Drafts, texts, calendar entries, voicemail, not until counsel says so. Good. Paper moved on his end. I'm recommending it to your chair in about an hour. I also need to tell you something you will not enjoy. Go ahead. You are the certifying official. Your name is on the instrument. He said it without any softening at all. Right now, the strongest thing in your favor is that you asked for documentation in writing before anybody was accused of anything. Keep doing exactly what you have been doing, and stop doing anything clever. I haven't done anything clever. Good. Don't start Thursday. At 5:20, Priya came down to my office with her laptop already open. I want to show you something before I lose my nerve, she said. She set it on my desk. It was the payment approval workflow. Every disbursement in our system leaves a trail of routing steps. Who submitted it, who reviewed it, who released it, and at what minute. These are the 4 cascade payments, she said. Look at the review column. There were 2 names on all 4. Alan Reeve as creator, Alan Reeve as approver. My user ID isn't on any of them, I said. No, it isn't. She closed the laptop halfway. I want you to understand what that means in June, when somebody asks who let this happen. It means the compliance manager never saw them. It also means somebody will ask why I never saw them. Then you say the truth. They never routed to you. She rubbed her thumb along the edge of the laptop. Wren, put that log in the ticket tonight. Not tomorrow. Tonight. While nobody is angry yet. I did it at 5:34, with a 1-line note describing what the screenshot showed and where it came from. My mother called at 6 while I was driving home. She wanted to tell me about a neighbor's surgery and a sale on garden soil. I let her talk for 11 minutes. In the other life, I had stopped answering her calls somewhere around the 2nd deposition, because every conversation ended with her asking whether it was over yet. You sound tired, sweetheart, she said. It's closeout week. You always say that. This one's different. They're all different, my mother said. And then they're all Thursday. I laughed out loud in the car, alone, for the first time in what my body insisted had been 3 years. At 6:40 p.m., my phone lit up on the kitchen counter, in the same spot, with the fridge open and the same jar of olives on the shelf. It was not Alan, Priya. 4 words. He just called Corinne. Under it, a screenshot of the visitor log at the front desk, time-stamped 6:22 p.m. Corinne Alder had signed into our building. I did not drive back to the office. I want to be clear about that, because in my first life, I would have. I called Priya instead. Are you still there? Parking lot. I'm not going back in alone. Don't. Where's the visitor log? front desk tablet. It syncs to the building system automatically. She was breathing fast. Wren, she badged onto the 3rd floor. Guest badge, escorted. Escorted by who? Guess. Then we don't do anything, I said. We write down what we saw and we go home. That feels insane. It feels insane because it's the right thing. My hands were shaking again, so I put them flat on the counter. Marcus is calling the board chair tonight. If there's a legal hold by tomorrow morning, anything they touch tonight is worse for them than for us. Priya was quiet for a second. You're very calm, for someone whose name is on page 9. I'm not calm, I said. I'm just done being surprised. I called a lawyer at 6 the next morning, before I had brushed my teeth. Ruth Ayer's office did not open until 9, but her intake line took messages, and I left a long one. I said I was a certifying official on a state subaward. I said I had been instructed in writing to certify without documentation. I said I had not signed anything and did not intend to. Then I sat on the edge of my bed and looked at my work phone, face down on the nightstand, for a long time. The legal hold came at 7:52 the next morning, Wednesday, October 8. It came from an email address I had never seen. Delaney Cho, outside counsel, a firm in Sacramento the board had retained overnight. The subject line said, Litigation Hold Notice, SB 2415. It went to all 41 employees. The language was plain. Preserve all documents, emails, texts, drafts, voicemails, and calendar entries relating to Subaward SB 2415 and to Cascade Modular Housing LLC. Do not delete. Do not archive. Do not use personal devices to move files. Direct all vendor communications through counsel. At 8:15, our IT director sent a second notice. Automatic email deletion had been suspended across the organization, effective immediately. Corinne Alder was waiting near my car when I arrived at 8:40. She had parked 2 spaces down in a white sedan, and she got out when she saw me. She was wearing a good coat and holding a paper cup of coffee she did not drink from once. Wren, do you have 5 minutes? I don't think I should talk to you. It's not about the invoices. She smiled the way you smile at a wedding you don't want to attend. It's about you. There's a permanent role at Cascade for someone who understands grant compliance. It's remote. It's 160. I looked at her coat and her undrunk coffee and the 2-space gap she had chosen so she could see the entrance. You created a delivery log at 3:51 yesterday afternoon, I said. It went out at 4:04. Her face did not move at all, which told me more than any expression would have. Files get regenerated when you export them, she said. 11 of those units were delivered before there was a pad to put them on. Wren. She stepped closer, and her voice went soft and reasonable. I want to say this kindly. You are one person with a spreadsheet. Alan has run 4 organizations. You have a mortgage and a job you like. I've heard this speech. You have not heard it from me. No, I agreed. In my version, somebody else gave it. I got in my car and locked the door and sat there until she drove away, and then I wrote down every word of it in the ticket with the time and sent it to Delaney Cho. Counsel called me 11 minutes later. Miss Halliday, I represent the foundation, not you. I want that said in the first minute, so it isn't said later. Do you understand the difference? You protect the organization. If the organization decides I'm the problem, you're not my lawyer. Correct. Most people need that explained twice. A pause. You should retain your own counsel. Today, if you can. I called someone at 6 this morning. Good. She sounded genuinely surprised, and I understood she had expected to spend the call convincing me. Then here is what I need, and nothing more. Do not certify the final expenditure report. Do not communicate with Cascade. And I need the delivery log from yesterday in its original form, metadata intact. It's already in the compliance ticket. So is my note about the creation timestamp. So is the parking lot conversation. I read the first two at 4 this morning, she said. They're the reason there's a hold. The building felt wrong all morning. Nobody had been told anything, and everybody knew something. 2 program officers stood by the printer talking about nothing in particular. A grants assistant asked me whether she should stop cleaning out her sent folder, and I told her yes, stop, and did not explain why. Legal holds do that. They arrive without a story attached, and people fill in the story themselves. At 9:30, our development director asked me, quietly, whether the Grey Ridge money was fine. I told her I could not discuss it, and that counsel would communicate. She looked at me the way you look at a doctor who will not answer a simple question. I went back to my office and closed the door, and did not open my email for 4 minutes. Marcus Fells sent his preliminary findings at 11:40 a.m. He copied Delaney, Priya, the board chair, and me. He did not copy Alan, and I understood exactly what that omission meant. It was 6 pages. He had done in 30 hours what I could not have done in 6 years, because he could ask questions I had no standing to ask. He had called the manufacturer in Fontana. The serial numbers on the Cascade delivery log belonged to a real product line. He asked them to check the 30 serials against their production and shipping records. 9 of the 30 had shipped to a Sierra Bridge address. All 9 shipped in September. 11 of the serials had never been manufactured. The numbers were in a valid format and inside a valid range, but no unit with those numbers had ever come off the line. 10 serials existed and had shipped in July to a buyer in Nevada. Not to us. The manufacturer would not name that buyer to Marcus without process, and Marcus wrote that sentence plainly instead of guessing. He had also obtained the bank confirmation. Our 4 transfers to Cascade, $2.3 million, had settled into a business account at a credit union in Reno. The account had been opened on July 31, 2 days after the LLC was registered. The last page made me put down my coffee. Marcus had requested the state's file. Not our copy of the approval letter, the state's own copy of what they approved. The state's approved version of the budget modification memo said fabricated units, delivered and installed. The version sitting in our closeout package said fabricated units procured. The state had approved 1 document. We were 48 hours from certifying a different one. I read that paragraph 6 times. In my first life, this was the finding that ended me, and it arrived 14 months late in a report I read alone in a parking garage. This time, it arrived on a Wednesday morning, while my coffee was still warm, because a finance director had asked a narrow question of an outside firm on a Tuesday. Alan came for me at 2:00 p.m. He did not knock. He stood in my doorway holding a printed page, and his face was a color I had never seen on him. "Close the door," he said. "I'd rather leave it open." He stopped himself. He came in and shut it himself, and stood with his back against it, which is not a thing an innocent man does. "You went to an outside auditor behind my back." Priya requested the review under Section 11. I gave him documents when he asked for them. "You handed him a vendor PDF and told him it was fabricated." "I told him when it was created," I said. "That's not a characterization. That's a field in the file." He put the printed page on my desk. It was our budget modification memo, the version that said procured. "This is the approved document. This is what the state signed off on." His hand stayed on it. Whatever Fells thinks he pulled a draft, or somebody in Sacramento uploaded the wrong attachment. It happens constantly. Then it'll clear up. It will not clear up in 2 days. His voice cracked on it. There's a hold on 41 people's email. The chair called me at 10 o'clock last night. 10 o'clock, Wren. I looked at the memo on my desk, and something in my chest went very quiet and very cold. Alan, the version history is in the system. Anyone can open it. Version histories are garbage. Everybody knows that. Files get saved. Autosave runs. A laptop syncs at midnight. It was saved at 9:06 p.m. on August 22nd, I said. From your account, 11 days after the state approved it. The only words that came out were delivered and installed. That's a formatting cleanup. It's the only difference between the two versions. I read them line by line. It took me 40 minutes. He changed then. I had seen him do it in board meetings, and I had always admired it. He sat down in my guest chair. He let his shoulders drop. He made his voice gentle. Wren, I want to help you here. He nodded slowly, agreeing with himself. You've been under enormous pressure. You're managing a $9 million closeout with a staff of 1. You found something that looked wrong, and instead of coming to me, you went outside. I understand the impulse, Alan, but right now, from where the board sits, you are the compliance manager who let $2.3 million out the door without a single delivery ticket in the file. There it was, 14 months early, and word for word. You approved the vendor, I said. You created it in the system on August 5th. You approved all 4 payments the same day you created them. I approved payments, a compliance manager cleared. I never cleared them. I never saw them. They didn't route to me. Prove that, he said, and that was where he lost. Because I had spent Tuesday doing the boring thing, and Priya had pulled the routing log at 5:20, and it had been sitting in the compliance ticket since 5:34 the previous evening. The approval workflow logs every routing step, I said. All 4 cascade payments show director created, director approved. My user ID does not appear on any of them. It's 4 clicks, Alan. Outside counsel already has the screenshot and the export. He did not say anything. Here's the part I think you should hear from me before you hear it from someone else. My voice was shaking now, finally, and I let it. Yesterday, at 3:51 the afternoon, Corinne Alder created an 11-page delivery log. She sent it at 4:04. 11 of those 30 serial numbers have never been manufactured. 10 shipped in July to Nevada. 9 came to us. You don't know that. The manufacturer knows it, Marcus called them. They put it in writing on their letterhead. Alan's hand was on the arm of the chair. He was pressing down hard enough that his fingertips had gone white. There's a way through this, he said. You certify tomorrow. The money is already spent. The report is already true in every way that matters. The site opens. In January, we do a quiet vendor reconciliation. Cascade delivers the balance or refunds the difference. Nobody loses a job. Nobody loses a house. You want me to sign a false certification and fix it later. I want you to not detonate this organization over a documentation gap. It isn't a gap, I said. A gap is when something's missing. This is when something's made up. He stood. At the door, he turned, and I watched him choose his last card. You will never work in this sector again. Maybe, I said, but I'm not going to be the name on page 9. The board chair, Denise Okafor, called an emergency executive session at 5 p.m. I was not in it. I sat at my desk and answered a documentation request from Delaney Cho, line by line. Because it was the only useful thing left to do. Twice I stopped and looked at the certification page on my screen, at the blank field with my name printed under it. At 6:40, the same hour 3 days running, my phone buzzed. Priya. 2 lines this time. Alan placed on administrative leave. Effective now. Building access revoked. Chair wants you on a call at 8 a.m. I read it standing up. I did not feel triumphant. I felt like someone had taken a weight off my chest and set an identical one on my back. Administrative leave is not a verdict. It is a pause button. The Cascade money was still gone. The state portal still closed at 5 the next day. And now nobody was going to certify anything at all. Delaney Cho worked for the foundation, not for me, and I had just watched a very smart man spend an afternoon rehearsing a story in which I was the one who let it happen. At 9:20 p.m., my own attorney called me back. Her name was Ruth Iyer. She had spent 30 years on False Claims Act cases, and she asked me one question before anything else. Did you sign it? No? Then we have something to work with, Ruth said. Get some sleep. Tomorrow is going to be long. Thursday did not end anything. It only moved it. At 8:00 a.m. I sat in a conference room with Denise Okafor on speaker, Delaney Cho at the table, Ruth Iyer on my phone, and Marcus Fells in the corner with a laptop. Nobody certified anything at 5 o'clock that day. Instead, Delaney filed what she called a voluntary disclosure. She explained it to me once, plainly, and I have repeated it many times since. A voluntary disclosure is when an organization goes to the government first and says, "We found something wrong inside our own money. Here is everything we know, and we are not asking you to be gentle." It doesn't erase liability, she said. It changes the posture. You go in as the people who found it, instead of the people who hid it. The state granted a 30-day closeout extension the following Tuesday. Not because we asked nicely, because a disclosure with an outside auditor's work papers attached is easier for an agency to work with than a certification they would later have to unwind. Marcus finished his engagement in November. The final report was 51 pages, and I have read every one of them. Of the $2.3 million paid to Cascade Modular Housing, 9 units were delivered and installed at a documented value of $641,000. $1.66 million had no corresponding goods, services, or delivery of any kind. The credit union produced signature cards under subpoena. The Cascade account had 2 authorized signers, Corinne Alder, and a second name added on August 14. A. Reeve, listed as an operations consultant. Alan had signed a card at a bank window in Reno, while our board sat in a room reading his fire recovery update. The manufacturer's letter went in as an appendix. 11 serial numbers had never existed. The 10 July units had gone to a modular dealer in Elko who bought them at retail and knew nothing about any of us. Marcus interviewed him for 20 minutes and wrote one paragraph about it. Here is the part people always want me to dramatize, and I will not. There was no arrest at a gala. Nobody was led out of the building in front of a crowd. Nobody made a speech. The board terminated Alan Reeve for cause on November 19. For cause meant no severance and no consulting agreement, which is the version that actually costs a man something. The foundation filed a civil suit against Reeve, Alder, and Cascade Modular Housing LLC for the full $1.66 million plus costs. His homeowner's policy and his professional liability policy both denied coverage because fraud exclusions exist for exactly this reason. The disclosure went to the State Inspector General. Because federal disaster dollars had passed through the award, it also went to the United States Attorney's Office in Sacramento. Both opened files. Delaney told me the honest thing on the courthouse steps in January. Cases like this take 2 to 4 years. Sometimes they resolve as civil restitution and nobody goes anywhere. Sometimes they don't. I am not going to promise you a headline. I don't want a headline. Everybody says that, she said. Some people mean it. As of this spring, the federal file is still open. Alder entered into a tolling agreement, which is a way of saying she decided cooperating was cheaper than not. Reeve has a criminal defense attorney and has said nothing publicly. The civil case has a trial date in October that will probably move. That is what accountability actually looks like. It is slow and it is paper, and it does not fit in a montage. My own part took until February to close. I sat for 2 interviews with state investigators. The second one lasted 4 hours and 10 minutes. They were not friendly, and they were not hostile. A man named Okoro asked me the same question in 8 different shapes. Why did the compliance manager not stop $2.3 million? Ruth Iyer answered, by building my file out of things I had already done. That is the only reason it worked. She laid it out in a single sitting, in order, with the timestamps. Monday, October 6, 4:26 p.m. A documentation request for Cascade delivery records, filed before anyone had been accused of anything, copied to finance per written procedure. Monday, 4:26 p.m. A state help desk ticket number from a call in which I asked what documentation a closeout expects. Tuesday, 7:15 a.m. The executive director's written instruction to certify without vendor documentation forwarded into the compliance ticket with the headers intact and escalated rather than followed. Tuesday, 5:34 p.m. The payment routing log showing 4 director-created, director-approved disbursements and no compliance review at all. Tuesday, 4:17 p.m. My note on the delivery log metadata, sent to an independent auditor and to finance, 13 minutes after receipt. Thursday, 5 p.m. No signature. The certification page was blank. This is a boring file, Ruth told Okoro. It is the most boring file I have ever presented. That is the point. She never has to explain herself, because she never left a gap that needs explaining. The routing log did the rest. My user ID did not appear on any of the 4 Cascade payments. Alan had approved his own vendors' invoices and had spent a Wednesday afternoon rehearsing a version in which I had cleared them, and the system remembered otherwise. The state closed its review of me in February with a 2-page letter. No finding of non-compliance attributable to the certifying official. Ruth had it framed. I keep it in a drawer. Denise Okafor offered me the executive director role in December. I said no. I have thought about that decision more than any other one in this story, and I want to be honest about why. It was not nobility. It was that the job was the prize, and the prize was the trap. A director who can create a vendor at midnight and approve his own invoices does not need to be corrupt to be dangerous. He only needs to be tired or frightened or certain that he is the only one who understands. I would have been tired. Everyone is, eventually. So, I told the board what I would take instead. I asked them to split the role. I asked for vendor creation to be moved out of executive hands entirely. Dual approval on any disbursement over $50,000. The compliance function, reporting to the audit committee instead of to the director. And an annual independent review of every sub-award closeout, budgeted a year in advance so that nobody ever has to be brave in order to request one. That last one mattered most. Priya had to be brave on a Tuesday. It should not have required bravery. It should have required a calendar. They gave me all of it. It took 4 board meetings and a consultant nobody wanted to pay for. I am the director of grant integrity now. It is a smaller title than deputy director, and it is the only one in the building that cannot be fired by the person it audits. My salary went up 9%, not 14%. Priya stayed. She is the one who told me, in a parking lot in October, that she was not going back inside alone. She is the reason any of it held. Her office has a new photograph in it now, of a boat she actually owns, half of one anyway, with her brother. The Placerville site opened on December 3. 21 families had been in the church gym and in motel vouchers since the fire. In the life I remember, they stayed there through February. 2 of them stopped coming to case management appointments, and we lost track of them entirely, and I never found out what happened to either one. This time, the disclosure unlocked a state bridge advance, because Marcus's report gave the agency something solid to lend against. We bought the units directly from the manufacturer, at cost, with a delivery term written into the purchase order in words that cannot be quietly edited out of a memo. I drove up for the opening because Priya made me. It was 38 degrees and gray. The pads were poured and the utility trenches were covered. There were 21 small houses, in 2 rows, with numbers on the doors and gravel between them that crunched when you walked. A woman named Alma Fuentes had Unit 14. She had 2 kids, a folding table, and a rice cooker in a cardboard box. She asked me if the heat worked at night. In the gym, she said, it had not. I said I would find out for her. I called the site supervisor from her doorway. It did work. She nodded once and went back inside and started unpacking the box. Somebody had put a plastic folding table out by the gravel road with a coffee urn on it. The coffee was terrible. I stood there and drank it and watched a man carry a mattress up 3 steps with his son holding the other end badly, both of them laughing at how badly. I did not think about Alan Reeve. I want to say that I did. I want to say I had some clean, final thought about him, but he had stopped being the center of anything sometime in November, and standing on that gravel, I could not have described his face. What I thought about was the copier, that first morning, still warm under my hand. His palm flat on my stack of invoices, the whiteboard behind him with the smiley face drawn under the deadline. He had been so sure. He walked into my office at 2:00 on a Monday and offered me a title, and the entire machine of it rested on one belief, that I would sign a page I had not read. I read page 9. That is the whole thing. That is all I did differently. I asked for a document in writing on a Monday, and when a man told me not to worry about it, I put his instruction in the file instead of in my head. I drove home down highway, 50 inches the dark, past Bradshaw, where the light was green. I have a small house now with a bad kitchen, and a mortgage I am not proud of, just paying. On Sunday mornings, I take the state's letter out of the drawer sometimes and read the 2-page version of the worst year of a life I no longer have. Then, I put it back. I make coffee, and on Monday, I go in early, and I open the file.